infrastructure management in Europe. And I should say it's not only limited to the territory of the European Union, because we are the only association, in fact, representing the interest of the companies based on a territory of also the accession and candidate countries like Western Balkan, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and so on. We represent the vast majority of the freight businesses, as well as the passenger operations in Europe. And there I have to also say that it means the covering the operations of both the public and privately owned enterprises, operation of the enterprises that are integrated with regard to the holding structure, or purely separate to the freight, passenger or infrastructure businesses. As such, we have more than 70 members. I'm glad, of course, that among the members from the Czech Republic, also the Czech Railways and the infrastructure manager that are members of the CR. And with that, I would say, coverage, we can be proudly saying that yes, we are the voice of the European Railways vis-à-vis the political institutions in Brussels, because our major mission, in fact, our principal mission is to work with the European institution on the future or the better regulating the railway and the transportation in general. So in practice we speak on a daily basis with the European Commission, with the members of the European Parliament, as well as the Transport Council. We of course cooperate also with the other institutions in Brussels and in the neighborhood, whether it's the banking sector, whether it's the partner association, or other I would say bodies that are essential for the development of the regulatory activities in a railway business. Talking about the high speed, I suggest that we go slightly backwards to the history of the high speed. In fact, why the high speed as such has been born. And as you can see, that we go back to the 1973-74, where the first line had been built, or was starting to be built in Italy, to connect the Florence and Rome as the major hubs. And what is interesting in that context is that one of the major motivations of building the high speed at that time was how to reduce the dependency of the oil on the oil. As you might recall, that was the time, so the 70s, that the Europe was struggling with the high price of the oil. There was an oil crisis. And there was therefore one of the motivations why at all to start thinking about moving the cargo and moving the passengers to the rail, how to electrify the rail, and how to use better the available resources, energy resources that are available on the mainland of Europe. Then obviously there have been other aspects of why to increase the mobility of the customers, especially the passengers on the rail, and how to increase the network of the high-speed line system. So then in fact the first country creating the network of the high-speed was France, and later on we have seen also the boom of the high-speed line in Spain, and then again in Italy. So Europe in 2015 means that we have more than 7,000 kilometers of the high-speed lines. I have to say that that's the note that you can see at the end of the sentence at the bottom of the page. We have a number of high-speed lines, but we still miss to have them connected on an interoperable manner. So that will be a huge challenge that we have to promote and pursue. So how to ensure the interoperability across the entire European network of the high-speed line system. Now, that's the map that shows the situation a few years ago. The red lines, they show already the high-speed lines completed. Then you have the blue lines that are the connections for the speeds around 200 kilometers per hour. And as you can see that already a few years ago we had a relatively good connection, good network, but mostly concentrated on the western part of Europe. The situation in 2025 should slightly change, but as we have also heard from the representatives of the Czech Transport Ministry and the Czech Infrastructure Manager, we cannot expect having the high-speed connections crossing the Czech Republic by that time yet. So there is still a number of things that need to be improved to connect the Czech network with the high-speed line system after 2025 and hopefully before 2035. Now, why high speed, and where we can see the high speed as competitive business with regards to the other transportation modes. And as a CR representative, I really have to say that we need to see the competitiveness of the railway vis-à-vis the other transportation sectors, and obviously with regards to the high speed, it always will be the aviation. That's the chart that shows that we can be quite well competitive for the distances up to 750, or some people can even say that if you reach the speed 320, 350 kilometers an hour, then certainly you can go up to distances of 1,000 kilometers, where the high-speed rail is going to be competitive. It's really essential because what the planning should tell us about the future designing of the high-speed line system needs to take into the consideration where are the hubs, where will be the customer demand, whether there is a potential business for the high speed as such. Yes, there is also an additional, I would say, element or momentum that is coming with the last terrorist attacks that have showed up in the western part of Europe that needs to be taken into consideration and needs to be also mitigated, which leads us to the situation that we have to install the metal frames or the body frames or body detectors in front of the platforms at certain stations like at Paris North, which certainly delay then the whole traveling time of the customers using the high-speed train. They may even decrease the competitiveness of the high speed, but it's, I would say, for another type of the conference, how to implement such measures mitigating the security threat that would not be at the expense of the competitiveness of the high speed. But it's always good to take that into the consideration also for the future designing of the high-speed line system in the Czech Republic. Now, the aspect that definitely needs to be taken into the consideration is the factor of the external costs and the land use. And the chart shows very clearly, that's the scientific funding, so it's not, I would say, the virtual and theoretical analysis, that's the practice that we should demonstrate it in daily use, that the high speed is the least polluting transportation mode. It produces the least damages to the climate, it produces the best urban effects, it produces the lowest land use, and it has got also the quite low level of the noise generated by the operation, and so on and so forth. What is probably one of the most important elements for the future designing of the high speed, and I would say convincing also the local politicians and the local public about the advantages of the high speed, is the chart on the bottom of the page, which shows that for the same throughput as the motorway, and we talk about the throughput at around 8,000 persons an hour, you need to have the motorway of the width of approximately 75 meters, while you can have the very same throughput using the high-speed line or the high-speed train with the width of 25 meters. So you need just 1/3 of the land use if you will the high-speed in an intelligent way, if you will the high-speed with the same capacity, which then is comparable with the motorway. So that's the factor that I believe should be one of those convincing then the local public, local population, that it will bring an additional value to them as well, instead of bringing rather the difficulties to the villages or the cities. Now, in general, to summarize the socioeconomic factors, of course, they are mainly positive. That's why we are all here and trying to promote it. It reduces traveling time, it reduces cost, it creates the new opportunities. And it needs to be said that the high speed and the railway in general as such is really the major economic contributor for the general and overall economy of the state. So connecting state, connecting Europe, bringing additional value to the mobility also brings the additional economic benefits to the society. So this is something which should always be on the top of the considerations, that the rail brings additional value to the economy. Second, of course, it fosters more competitive land and labor markets and agglomeration economies, because the high speed, it's a cohesion factor. It has been demonstrated on a various circumstances, and I will show few cases of that kind in the coming slides, that the high speed has got really the effect of the territorial cohesion. It frees up the capacity on congested conventional lines, and it also gives some other potential for the very much needed transportation of the cargo of the rail. So that's additional aspect that certainly plays a role here. Although of course it's not panacea. So when we build a high speed, definitely we will not have 100% of the utilization of the conventional rail for the freight trains. But still, it provides an additional capacity on the side of the freight. Then the high speed can also act as a feeder to the airports, and I fully agree with the conversation, with the discussion that has been preceding my speech here, that yes, there is a clear intention to connect the high speed with the key airports, with the airports that can allow for the intermodal mobility between the hubs in Europe and the intercontinental transport. So the airport for the intercontinental connections should ideally be connected with the high speed. And the last, certainly, and I have not mentioned the safety yet, the railway and the high speed brings much higher level of the safety compared to any other modes of transport. So we should also consider that in our argumentation vis-à-vis the policymakers, vis-à-vis the local public, that the high speeds increase the safety of the entire mobility chain. So that's another argument that needs to be used very, very broadly, alongside with the low energy consumption compared to the other transportation modes, which is especially essential, again, with regards to what I mentioned at the beginning. We need to reduce the dependency on the oil. Even though oil is currently relatively cheap, we will not have, say, infinitive resources of the oil. Moreover, we need to import as Europeans the oil from the extra-European territories, which is never safe, so it's better to rely on the energy resources that are present in Europe and mainland Europe, and that's why the rail, again, is the solution. Obviously, there are also potential negative factors that should be taken into account when building the high-speed rail. First place, it's the relatively high fixed or investment cost that needs to be associated, or is associated, in fact, with the construction of the high-speed. We talk about the construction costs spanning between 12 and 30 million euro per kilometer. I believe that's approximately what has been presented before by the representative of the Ministry of Transport. So if we are within this range of the figures, then probably we are well within the figures that need to be taken into the consideration when designing the budget for the high speed. That's of course not enough, because we need to maintain the high-speed line in the high-quality parameters in order to allow the safe operation of the high-speed trains. And there we talk about approximately 70,000 euro per kilometer on the annual basis. So this is the budget that of course needs to be allocated or projected well in advance prior to the construction of the high-speed rail system. Otherwise, it will make no sense to even consider building the lines if it will not have the budget to maintain the high speed. We have to take into consideration possible negative effects, nuisance effects along the high-speed lines. And again, we have to be very, very much transparent vis-à-vis the public, vis-à-vis let's say the behavior of the population, which is called NIMBY, so never in my backyard. No, of course it brings some negative effects, but they can be mitigated. Those are the effects that have to be taken into consideration again while designing the services of the high-speed lines during the construction phase. Increased competition from the low cost. Currently, it's not an eligible factor. I can only hope that when we talk about building the high-speed lines in the Czech Republic in a horizon of, let's say, 15 to 20 years, it will be less important than it's today. But today, I have to tell you that we have growing difficulties of, I would say, being competitive vis-à-vis the low-cost airlines. The recent figures, even from the Eurostar, which may be somehow even sound surprising to you, are that the Eurostar is losing 2 consecutive years on an annual basis its ridership compared to the number of travelers using the low-cost airlines between the London and Paris or London and Brussels. So there is a strong competition currently on the with regards to flying. So we have to take that into the consideration as well, not only when building and constructing the line, but also building the access, or constructing, designing the access of the trains to the lines, and considering the level of the track access charges. Because if I go back to the aspect of the Eurostar losing the ridership of the customers, it's mainly related to the high fixed cost of the company, which are driven or in fact set by the relatively high track access charges of Eurotunnel and high-speed links linking the Eurotunnel with London on one side and with Paris on the other side of the tunnel. And they're forming nowadays more than 50% of all the cost of the company. Then the next one is the technological progress of the other modes, and certainly when we talk about the reduction of the dependence on the oil, the road is behaving the very same manner. They also try to explore the opportunities of how to use the electric energy instead of the oil for the future, I would say, cars, or the future design of even the trucks or the buses. So we have to be very careful in observing what's happening on the other transportation mode in order to keep the competitiveness all the time. And the last bullet point that has been already mentioned by the previous speakers, there is always a risk of the overrun of the investment cost of the infrastructure projects. So we have to be extremely careful that those overruns are still within certain limits, or if you will be as lucky or as disciplined as the Swiss are, even building the big constructions like the recent Gotthard Tunnel below the costs designed for the project. The EU white paper, the Commission white paper has been mentioned by Stefania Wacki, so I don't need to repeat it again and again, but I just wish to consider the right-hand box, which talks about what is expected from the member states to construct by 2030 and 2050, where it even says that yes, by the 2050 we should have the complete network of the high-speed lines in place and connecting the key airports as well. So it's really now the high time discontinuing, I would say, the preliminary discussion, but really going rather to the design phase in order to be connected as expected by the Europeans. I already mentioned that I would wish to talk about a few examples of the clear benefits of building the high-speed lines in Europe. Not surprisingly, and it will be again about the Paris-Lyon, which is the most heavily used high-speed line in Europe nowadays. The ridership is extremely high, and as you can see, it's the 40% of the population of France that can nowadays use this line. Of course, it's not the 40% lives at each end of the line, but it brings together with the connecting services of the rail or the other transportation modes, the population that can use the Paris-Lyon link in such a high figures. It also leads up to the situation that it's more than 90% of the market that has been absorbed by the rail compared to, I would say, relatively negligible than the market share of the aviation, which is mostly connecting then the Paris-Charles de Gaulle airport with the intercontinental flights. Why so? Because Paris-Charles de Gaulle is still only partially connected with the high speed, and that's why not all the trains are connecting all the services from the regions. Then high-speed to Rome-Milan, it's another I would say, example of a very good and very successful high-speed link that has been connecting the biggest agglomerations of Italy, and it has attracted not only, of course, the services provided by the state operator or state operating company, the Ferrovie dello Stato Italiane, but also it has attracted a private investor to come and to invest into the train services in Italy. So the high-speed lines network in Italy is the first one where you can really enjoy traveling on a completely private train provided and offered by the NTV company. In all the cases, as you can see, that's the last statement of the line. The competitiveness of the high speed led us into the situation of absorbing a relatively high portion of the aviation market, reduce the cost of the mobility, reduce the dependence on the oil, and increased also decreased in fact the effect on the climate. And now there is a project that you can somehow compare to what's going to happen maybe here in the Czech Republic. So the effects of the future construction of the high-speed line 2 in Great Britain. So as you can see that's the line which has got already two phases now. The one is connecting London and Birmingham. Then the second phase also connecting Leeds and Manchester. What is essential, and that's in fact that has been in the base of the debates in the UK for years and for more than a decade, was what are the economic effects, what are the effects of the territorial cohesion, what are the effects of the boosting of the social economic aspects in the UK as such. And those have been the driving factors behind it. Whoever followed the discussion in the UK for the last, as I said, a decade, finds that it has never been very easy, and still you will see the number of controversial factors popping up in the newspaper here and there. You could have observed the heated debates in the parliament, but there is a commitment to build a link, because there is a commitment to help the society, there is a commitment to ensure the territorial cohesion and to help the development of the regions in the UK. So that's why it will be built. Broadening it up a little bit to the entire Europe, and it's again about why we do it from the Europe perspective. It's again about the territorial cohesion. It's again about increasing the European competitiveness, because it's the high speed that improves the competitive benefits of European economy vis-à-vis the other regions of the world. So those are the principal factors, together with the third one, which is again very much needed the reduction of the dependency on the oil imports. So the three factors: territorial cohesion, the boosting economy, and the reduction of the oil imports. That's why Europe has decided to build the high speed, and now, because we have most of the high speed in fact in the western part of Europe constructed, there are new challenges that are still in place and need to be more and more pursued. First place is the right condition for the high-speed cooperation across borders. Because we have seen on the previous maps, on the various maps that we could have observed in the previous speeches, that we have relatively good services within the states, but really limited high-speed services across the borders. In fact, historically, we have the Thalys service, which links France with Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And then we have the high-speed services linking France and Germany, and France, Belgium with the UK. That's more or less it. We don't have much more, because all the other services are really limited to the national territories. Yes, we have recently seen the opening of the Perpignan tunnel, allowing the high-speed service from Barcelona or Madrid, Barcelona to Paris, but still with a very limited ridership, a limited number of trains operating. So there is a need to boost those operations across the borders. And obviously for the country as the Czech Republic, the connectivity across the border will play an essential role, because most of the customers obviously will be those that will be using the service for the cross-border journeys. Second is the allocation of the high-speed capacity and the charging, and this is the aspect that I have already mentioned. We have to stay competitive vis-à-vis the aviation and the road sector. So the setting of the charging for the usage of the trucks will be absolutely crucial in the future in order to keep those services competitive and create the sustainability of those services. And then certainly, that's what we already mentioned, improving the connectivity with the conventional rail services and with the airports, because only this way we can create truly multimodal connections which are badly needed for the entire Europe. Last statement, again mentioned a few times already, but it's absolutely critical, and the example from France, it's the real one. We must never build the high speed on the expense of the conventional. So thank you, Imre, that was the right comment that we always have to make. We cannot simply omit the need investments to the conventional line system, because the conventional line system is the natural feeder for the future high-speed services. The last then, what are the needs? And I'm glad to say that yes, we have the huge support from the European Commission and the European Parliament with regards to the funding and financing of the railway in Europe. But we need to have a continuity of that the financing, which must come not from the European Commission or from Brussels, which must come from the states, from the member states, and also from the private sector. Otherwise, we will never be able to build a sustainable connection with the high-speed line system in Europe. And as I already said, that whilst we have the Western Europe that has got mainly the principal high-speed line system already constructed, built, and in the operation, and the challenge there is how to maintain and renew and connect it in an interoperable manner. In the side of the Central East European countries is how to develop the new high-speed line system, and obviously again using the same principles so that the high-speed line will be connected with the rest of the system on a European level and be interoperable. And with that, we probably will have good chances then to complete the high-speed network by 2015. Thank you very much for your attention.
So please your question. I think you can lay your question in Czech language.
No, as Libor presented in English, I will ask him in English as well. Of course, we can speak Czech as well. Microphone.
Switch to on.
Yeah, zapojil.
Okay. It's working. As Libor has presented everything in English, I will ask him as well in English, and probably in break we speak in Czech.